This coming Thursday, the 17th President of the Philippines will be officially sworn in to the position. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. won the nation's elections by a landslide in May, something not seen since his own father won office in 1981.
Yes, Ferdinand, otherwise known by his nickname Bong Bong, is the only son of former Philippine dictator Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and former First Lady Imelda Marcos. And there are concerns that his victory would signal a return to a dark history of the nation.
I want to thank you for all that you have done for us. There are thousands of you out there, volunteers, parallel groups, political leaders that have cast their lot with us.
They're back. After nearly 4 decades, the Marcos family dynasty returns to rule the Philippines. Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos Jr. won the country's elections by a margin not seen since his father's autocratic rule between 1965 and 1986. It was a period marked by corruption, martial law and violence. It took what was then deemed people's power to overthrow the Marcos regime, sending Ferdinand Sr., his extravagant wife and their family into a Hawaiian exile. The Marcoses are not the only ones back in the spotlight.
I, Sara Zimmerman Duterte,
do solemnly swear
The daughter of outgoing President Rodrigo Duterte, Sara, has been sworn in as Vice President. Her father's 6 years in office was known for a brutal anti-drugs campaign organized by vigilantes. Human rights groups are concerned the new Marcos-Duterte partnership could lead to more bloodshed and violence in years to come. Now, Richard Hedarian is a Filipino author and academic, and I asked him how Ferdinand Marcos Jr. would differentiate his term in office to the dark days of his father's.
If you look at Ferdinand Marcos Jr., right, obviously he's Ferdinand Marcos. So the name of the father is there. The image of a strong leader and a supposed golden era of stability is there. That nostalgia is very effective among a lot of people, not only the youth who have no idea of what happened in the past and fall for these TikTok videos, but actually even the older generations who suddenly romanticize the past. But the other aspect is this. If you look at Ferdinand Marcos Jr. himself, he's entirely different from his father, right? If you look at his TikTok videos, he looks like a BTS star. His hairstyle, bomber jacket, V-cut shirt, he looks fresh, his hair is jet black. And he's urbane and charming. We don't know if he ever graduated from any of these schools, but he attended Oxford. He's an aficionado of British underground culture. He plays saxophone. So on one hand, he can show different faces to different audience. As I said, they want to redeem themselves, but how they're going to redeem themselves, I don't know. It looks like they want to have it both ways. To say, I'm not dictator like my father to impress the West, including him visiting Australia just days after winning the presidency. At the same time, at home, his supporters are saying, no, we're going to get a decisive leader. Remember what his father was. So let's see how they're going to balance these two sides.
So Marcos Jr. has teamed up with Sara Duterte as his vice president. We know that both families are powerful in their own right. They're ambitious and they're used to commanding absolute power. So that being the case, what then does a partnership between these two dynasties would mean for the Philippines?
And the Marcoses come from the north, the Dutertes come from the south. It kind of looked like the Game of Thrones version of the Philippines, right? So really the opposition was boxed out. But the next phase will be the competition between these two winners, right? Who's going to take the spoils of the war? Now, initially, the impression was that Marcos will be a kind of a more passive, consultative leader. I think many people underestimated him. He was, for instance, supposed to give the National Defense Secretary position, a very key position, to Sara Duterte. Because Sara Duterte had to run separately as the vice president, and she was promised a top cabinet position. Guess what? Suddenly, Marcos rolled that back. He said, okay, have the education secretary. And everyone's scratching their head. Education secretary? How is that going to fit there? What Marcos is doing here is that he's putting trusted advisors, people he can rely on, right? Including relatives, right? In key positions of power. And that way, it seems like he wants to have more say about a new order that could emerge in the Philippines. And who knows, down the road, there could be huge competition between the two houses if ever they want to move forward with constitutional change.
So both families are now putting on a united front in their electoral victory. What would be the main points of contention politically from now on?
One already is on the issue, I think, relations with China, right? I think the Dutertes want to maintain a very robust and warm relations with China. China was a very important strategic partner to Duterte. I don't know about the Philippines because we didn't get any of those investments we were promised. The other one, of course, will also be, as I said, how the constitution, if a constitutional change is going to come, is it going to be more decentralized or centralized? Marcos comes from the Luzon, from the north, where the seat of power is. Duterte's come from the south, the most marginalized island in the Philippines. Clearly, they will have different visions of how the country has to move forward in terms of diffusion of power. The other issue, of course, down the road could also be who comes after Marcos Jr. Remember, there's Marcos-Duterte, Ferdinand Marcos-Duterte, right? Not immediately, but down the road, of course, the Marcoses want to have a say about what's going to happen in the country. While Sara Duterte definitely want to run for the presidency. She said, this time I stepped down. I didn't run for the presidency, but maybe the next time is for me. So there could be a lot of issues that will divide these houses. And we don't know. There could be other also proxy wars because their allies are in positions of power in the Congress, in the Senate. And we could also see proxy wars. So far, the two sides are projecting maximal unity. The Marcoses are openly grateful to the Dutertes. Although President Duterte, the outgoing Duterte, he called Marcos Jr. as a spoiled brat and a weak leader. So clearly, he was not happy his daughter not becoming the next president.
So the international community may be looking at the Philippines now. They're skeptical that a powerful family has just replaced a powerful dynasty at the Malacanang Palace. How do you see President Marcos Jr. winning the trust of regional and international governments?
By signaling difference on the media freedom issue, by signaling difference on the issue of war on drugs, but that's also where he can get into trouble with the Dutertes who want the status quo to continue. So this will be a very difficult balancing act.
Richard Hedarian there, author from the Philippines, and it's very interesting that he mentioned, that the Marcoses come from the north, the Dutertes come from the south, and we're about to see the Game of Thrones play out in the Philippines now in the next few years or so.